Welcome to Mind Vault podcast, where we unlock minds one story at a time. In today's fast-paced and ever-evolving work environment, understanding the importance of mental well-being is crucial for both the employees and the employer. Whether you are a leader looking to implement changes or an employee seeking balance, this is the space for you. So let's dive in and discover how we can transform our workplaces into thriving environments for mental health. Today, we are having Mbali Mzinyane. She is an experienced marketing professional armed with a background in media and communications. Her experience in various work environments has culminated into a launch of a wellness in the workplace. Mbali holds a postgraduate diploma in business administration. She recently completed her Master of Management in the field of digital business. Thank you so much for joining us today and welcome to Mind Vault.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and it's an absolute honor to be here and to be talking about such an important conversation.
Yeah. All right. So can you please take us through your journey on how Mbali became this multifaceted person that you have become? I don't think the bio, knowing you personally, even express how talented you really are as an individual. I'm really always fascinated by how knowledgeable you are. I don't think there's anything that I have asked you and you're not able to provide. So I'm just fascinated by how did you become this beautiful person that you are.
Sure. Thank you so much for that. So maybe to take a step back, Mbali is a daughter, a sister, a friend, a mother, and a multi-skilled professional. And my journey really, started off, this is post-university in the media space, as you have mentioned, which I then later transitioned into a corporate space via graduate program that I was fortunate to be part of, and that's where the bulk of my corporate journey really started. So in that environment and in that industry, I got to be in different roles. At some point I was in a sales role, at some point I was a marketing assistant, and then later became a marketing manager, so really specialized in tech marketing, and that's where a lot of my skill set has come in. But being in a role like that exposes you to different people, different industries, and just different dynamics. And part of my corporate career is really what's inspired the work that I do right now with wellness in the workplace. There were a lot of dynamics that I was exposed to very early on in my career that I was not able to really articulate and could not name. And that was because I did not have prior experience to the corporate environment. I didn't have coaching. I didn't have mentorship that was really there to guide me through the unwritten, unsaid stuff of corporate. So being a first generation as well in a corporate environment, I was under the impression that, my growth in this kind of space would be mainly related to my delivery of work, my output. So I was under the impression that, I had to work hard, and that would be the thing that would get me noticed. That would be the thing that would, accelerate my trajectory. But once you get into a corporate setting, you realize that's not the case. There are a lot of unsaid, unwritten rules and dynamics that you need to really master and hone in on to be able to navigate those dynamics. But to be more specific in terms of the inspiration around wellness in the workplace, I actually went through a workplace bullying situation very early on in my career. And at the time, I always say I did not have the language to really articulate what was happening. I thought I was dealing with a manager who was difficult. The manager had a reputation as well for being difficult. So it was kind of normalized in that environment that if you work for this specific manager, this is the kind of experience response you should expect. And so because of that, it didn't really prompt me to try and investigate other ways to just manage the situation. All I knew was that I was frustrated. I was sad most of the time. And that's actually the first time in my adult life that I had been exposed to therapy as a result of my workplace situation. And so much later, about 4 or 5 years later, once all of that had distilled and I was able to process that experience, I realized that that was a classic workplace bullying situation. And that then inspired me to think, how else can I, empower other people who might be in the situation, and how else can I then give them a platform and that will enable them to have the tools and the insights to navigate challenging dynamics like that. And that resulted in wellness in the workplace.
Beautiful. I love that. And because there's a lived experience and you've turned your lemons into lemonade, if we were to be frank about it. And so there are certain things that I would like to reflect on. And the reason why I thought we should do this podcast is because there are a lot of my clients that are coming in, like you did, go to therapy when you were struggling at work. And I want to help them. And yet I know that my skill set is limited to the practice, is limited sometimes to medication and therapy. And I still have to send them back to the wolves that beat them and made them come to me. And the thing is, now I've heard that people would say things like, I am being bullied at work. And sometimes it's just an open-ended conversation or an open-ended word that anybody can use. And so if we were to dive in your experience, what is wellness in a workplace? And the second question would be, what do you think qualifies as work bullying, or how did you experience the work bullying? Because it would be different for each and every individual depending on the environment they're in.
Yeah. So when we speak about wellness in the workplace, we're speaking about the holistic well-being of an individual, right? We're speaking about their physical well-being, their mental well-being, emotional well-being, spiritual well-being, and even financial well-being, because all of that does impact you as an individual when you're in the workplace. So we consider just the holistic nature of how an individual would be in the workplace, and how their wellness really can be supported by the organization, and also even at an individual level. I often talk about a shared responsibility between the individual and the organization. And I think when it comes to wellness, it is a joint responsibility between the individual and the company to ensure that people's well-being is optimized at work. So that's the part about wellness in the workplace. And it looks different for different people, right? And I think we need to be cognizant of that because it is a personal experience, but it's also just about having a baseline of just what healthy looks like, having a baseline of what performance looks like, of what productivity looks like, while maintaining that sense of health and wellness for the individual. So that's the first part of the question. The second part, talking about workplace bullying, and for me, the lived experience is my point of reference at this point. When we talk about workplace bullying, I think it's also important to separate what bullying is not, right? And a previous guest that I had on the platform said it so well, that sometimes we confuse performance management with bullying. And if you are not performing at a certain level, you are not delivering at a certain level, and your manager is doing due diligence to ensure that you are delivering on what you are contracted to do as an employee, that is not bullying. Bullying then comes with the subtle interactions that you might not be able to name, but you can feel. And I think that's why it's very difficult for people to put a name to it, right? So when we talk about things that you can feel, so for example, being isolated, from discussions, being isolated from conversations, being left off meetings, subtle facial expressions that may be, geared to you at an individual level. Maybe in one-on-one meetings, you presenting in a certain way, but when you're in front of people and in front of a team dynamic, you're showing a supportive, lively character that is very different to somebody who I have one-on-one engagements with. It's also, using certain kind of language that might be threatening in positioning certain things. For example, if you don't do this, then X will happen. I need this by this time, otherwise this will happen. Okay. So already it brings in a sense of feeling uneasy and anxious around when I deliver something or how I deliver something, because I know if I don't do it that way, I am going to face a certain consequence. Okay. Then it also has to do, with, things like targeting, where it could be specifically you that's being targeted, right? Where the bully at work is just, focused on you. They're treating other people differently, and you realize that. But when it comes to me, it's very specific. Sometimes, they make comments about how my hair looks, about how I'm dressed, about how I show up, how I present myself, how I talk. That becomes a point of reference of how they can target me, whether by humiliating me in front of people, making fun of me in front of people, and just subtle nuances that people usually don't know how to name, but they just experience. And the misconception is that, when you get into the workplace, everyone is going to be this mature adult who is emotionally intelligent and can manage themselves and can conduct themselves well. But bullies don't stop in the playground at school. They play at work as well, right? And it's also a strategy to try and gain some form of power in the dynamics and social dynamics within the workplace. And again, I will quote, Dr. Ngao, who has done some extensive work around workplace bullying, where, she differentiates the different types of bullies, speaking to lateral bullying, where it is a peer-to-peer type of bullying situation, where it could be an upward bullying, where somebody who's in a junior position is actually bullying somebody senior, but mainly because of the proximity that they have to maybe leadership or other people in positions of power within the organization. Or it could be downward bullying, which is very common, where you have a manager who uses bullying as a style of managing people, but also it could be somebody who uses bullying specifically to try and get a certain individual to feel some kind of way because they want to exert their power and dominance over that individual. So it is very complex, and I understand why people typically don't have the language to name it, which I didn't for the longest time, because it's so layered, and it can really just, do a number on just your perception of self, but also your perception of your experience because of how difficult it is to name it.
Good Lord. So I can feel from what you're saying how distressing it can be. Like you're saying, most people don't have the vocab to express what it is they're saying. And so then they come to us feeling anxious and depressed, and even now being afraid to go back to work. And so they come in, no, I can't go back to work. And I'm like, but what other options do we have? Looking at the income point of view. And, people are going to study and they're looking forward to going back to going to work and then to experience such violence, if I may say, subtle violence. And they end up just internalizing the whole experience and doubting themselves. And personally, I have seen, as a psychiatrist, I have seen individuals who take forever to recover from this. Some of them have actually stopped working because they wanted to recover, and now they have an opportunity to go back to work, and suddenly their anxiety is so disabling that they rather starve than to go back to work. Do you think that this is something that most organizations or corporate are aware that is happening? And if so, do you think they're doing anything about it, or they're waiting for somebody to come and say, I'm being bullied? And my question is that, is there criteria to say, okay, this qualifies, as bullying, and so we can take an action against the person who is bullying other people. Because at school they would say, if you do this and if you do this and if you do that, that qualifies as bullying, and these are the consequences. Therefore, I don't know if this subtle bullying in the workplace is something that management or human resource is aware of, and therefore have an action to take against the bullies. What is your take on that?
So I think in the conversations that I've had with either people who've been practicing in this kind of work or people who have been victims of workplace bullying is that managers and organizations are aware of this, right? But it is a case of them not doing anything about it. And them not doing anything about it is based on a number of reasons. So you could find that the bully or the bullies are people who are high performers within the organization. And if they decide to sanction them, then, it's going to put the organization at risk. So they could be the top salesperson or top performing manager, who has a relationship with one of the strategic clients that brings in a lot of money. And so there's usually a pattern or those kinds of subtle features around these bullies that then gives them that power, right? That then gives them that gravitas to say that I can do whatever I want here because nothing is going to happen. And the other thing is that they usually very, savvy in how they navigate around the workplace. They're usually able to strategically align themselves in terms of their relationships, different people who are in positions of power, different people who, they know they can benefit from, or people that they want to have a good impression, to. So it's very then difficult for somebody who is on the sidelines receiving this news that, oh, so-and-so is victimizing this other person. But how is it so? Because when I see this person, they are this, top employee who's charismatic, who's so, inclusive, and it looks like they're friends with everybody. It can't be them. It can't be them. And then that's the stuff that starts eroding, right, at your perception of the experience. That's the stuff that makes you second guess yourself, that makes you question, am I actually seeing this thing for what it is? Am I really, really making this up, or am I really experiencing this? And so then it becomes difficult to sanction or to put, consequences for people like that. But in terms of legislatively, if I'm not mistaken, I think this was in either 2021 or 2022, there was a code of good practice that was, instituted, and that defines what harassment is like in the workplace. And bullying was then featured under that code. And so from a legislative, from a labor law perspective, employees can then empower themselves with those kinds of, laws or regulations to try and take matters, forward, and to try and take matters in a direction that's going to then empower them. And to be honest, every organization or organizations that are, reputable, they do have conduct around what harassment is like. They might not necessarily expand on it or make it explicit, lest people know about it and they act on it. But then that's the responsibility for you as the employee to empower yourselves, make sure you understand what your company policies are when it comes to harassment at work, and also in terms of bullying, and if the clause around harassment encapsulates bullying, understand what your legal rights and standing is as an individual, so that you are more empowered to engage with these types of matters in the workplace. So first part of the question, yes, they are aware, but they typically don't do anything about it. And second part, as an individual, it is then your responsibility to empower yourself, and also to be mindful of the repercussions that then come up if you decide to take legal recourse to engage in a matter like that.
Meaning that if if I escalate this to management, it might not necessarily be resolved, so that might also bring a sense of helplessness then, to say, well, what is the point when I know that nothing is going to be done? And like you're saying, there are some people in top management who have a reputation to be bullies, and a few people have, whether in the corridors or even formally, have laid a complaint against them, but nothing was done because, like you're saying, they're the best performing, they're bringing a lot of revenue to the company, so the company can't afford to lose them. So what advice would you give to somebody, or what advice do you give also to the individuals that you coach, on this topic, to say, I'm experiencing bullying. Do I escalate? And I want to escalate, but I also have a responsibility to look after my well-being. Or do I just quit? Because most of the time I hear the quitting side. I want to quit. And I say, I understand, but I feel like it's an emotional decision. Let's try and sit down to see what other options we have. But somebody who is sometimes even suicidal, and somebody who is very anxious to a point that they're no longer performing, they get to work and literally they have a shake, and they're not able to hold down a pen or click on the laptop, and they're feeling so frustrated, and they feel like the only way to resolve this is to quit. So what advice would you give to individuals who are experiencing bullying?
So by the time that you quit, I think it's already too late, right? The situation has festered, has lingered long enough for you to get to that breaking point. And I think it starts with then taking a few steps back with the education around this. And that's why platforms like this exist. That's why Wellness in the Workplace, which is the podcast that I host, also exists, right? Where it is a movement around conscientizing people around these different dynamics in the workplace. And it's doing so for the purposes that individuals are empowered to engage with these types of dynamics. So that's one. So education is a very important aspect. I think, there has to be an undoing and a relearning that when you enter the workforce, it takes more than just you doing the job to navigate that. Understand that there are social dynamics that have real implications on your performance and your productivity. And so it is so important for you to then educate yourself on how do I navigate these dynamics. Then the second part is, if you are suspecting that you're being bullied, you have to monitor this over a period of time, right? Bullying is not a once-off in one instance incident. You have to monitor this over time so that you can truly qualify if this is a targeted harassment, because I would describe bullying as that. It is a targeted harassment. So make sure that you have evidence that you can document somewhere to be able to firstly reflect on, is this really happening? Is this really true? Is there empirical evidence that supports the fact that I suspect that I'm being bullied? What are people around me also saying about this individual? Is there a reputation that this bully that I'm engaging with, do they have that reputation? And if it is there, are there people who may have previously worked with them that I can lean towards to maybe just try and find out, how did you manage that? How did you navigate that? When you were, facing these types of stresses based on your relationship with this individual, what helped you, right? So being resourceful in just trying to get information from different people, because I think a lot of people who are in bullying situations tend to isolate, right? And it can come with a lot of shame and a lot of embarrassment to say that I'm being bullied, especially because, in the workplace, you are presenting yourself as somebody who is capable, who is competent. And so when you are now on the receiving end of being bullied, and you've known yourself to be somebody who is competent, who is capable, and who can handle themselves, it can make you retrieve. It can make you hold some shame to admit that I'm actually being bullied. And also the perception then that comes, especially if you are the first one to speak up on something like that, to say, hey man, you're worrying about something that's not even there. This is how things are always done. So maybe you're a bit soft, maybe you're a bit sensitive, right? And so qualifying your experience by leaning to other people around you is really, really helpful, because it helps to give you a sense of feeling like you're not alone. So don't isolate. The bully is already isolating you. Don't do that to yourself. And then lastly, engaging around then the HR policies, actually not last, probably second last point, engaging around HR policies, right? So how do we handle, reporting issues like this? Now that I have this evidence, this document of evidence that I've tracked and traced over time, that's been also validated by other people, what can I do in this situation, right? And also, what are our policies around legal recourse? Because this is actually going to then help you should you decide to take the matter even further, going to a place like CCMA if you want to engage. Because the question that you will be asked is, did you take legal recourse within, your organization? Did you look at the different options that were available to you before coming here? So find out what that is. And then I always like to say that, when it comes to quitting, there has to be an exit strategy. And an exit strategy isn't something that you do impulsively. An exit strategy means that you are putting things in place to ensure that there is a transition, not a sudden exit. The transition means that, you're either looking for a job, you're either saving up money, you're either building up a side hustle, to help support you or maybe supplement you while you transition to find another job. It has to be systematic, because you have to consider the responsibilities, you have to consider the climate that we're in, and also you have to consider the perception that, it gives when you enter the job market again, if you decide to suddenly quit and then have to, reposition yourself based on a previous experience. So it has to be systematic. Yes, it's an emotionally charged situation, but it doesn't have to be an emotionally charged decision in terms of how you manage something like that.
Wow. Okay. All right. So I'm really learning a lot, because what I am appreciating is that you're saying that the employee has also a primary responsibility, because I think sometimes when you talk about mental health in a workplace, sometimes there's a perception that work will provide sanity for me, and most of the time actually work is compromising our sanity, and we want to go back to work and say, you must restore my sanity, and we don't invest in personal growth or in grounding ourselves or in just finding ways in which I can survive a bully until such time when I am able to leave. Because then the clients come to me and they say, Dr. Chona, you must speak to my manager and you must tell them to stop doing this. And I say to them that is outside of my jurisdiction. The only I
just wanted to also add another point, is that also contextualizing that bullying situation is important, right? And what do I mean by that? Sometimes it's just happening in a team, not in the entire organization. And sometimes you become so narrow-minded in this experience because you're so frustrated and, it's so stressful that you don't think beyond what you're experiencing and you don't become resourceful enough to say, but it's only happening in this team. So what if I get a transfer? What if I move to a different department? What if I move to a different province because we've got a branch in a different province? And yes, it's going to be, something that's going to uproot my life and my, livelihood in this space. But maybe it's something that I can explore. How can I be resourceful in this environment before even considering quitting everything, before considering quitting the organization or starting afresh somewhere? Just think about, how else can I look to this current environment that I'm in, because it could just be something that's happening in this team with this person, and is there then an opportunity for me to move away from this team and this person?
Great. Another thing that I wanted to tackle was the fact that you work with an organization. So you work with organizations to help them, I believe, be more sensitized about mental health. But you also work with individuals. And then sometimes it might sound like you are the devil's advocate, like, you're representing. Do you find that you represent the organization, and then within the organization, some individual will come and have a problem with the same organization. Because I'm asking this because I know a lot of employee programs that exist within organizations, but clients don't access them because they fear that there is conflict of interest, that my employer has now outsourced this program to help me, but I want to go and complain about my boss, and I don't know if confidentiality will be respected, if I won't lose my job, because now they know. And sometimes there's nothing to do with the work environment. Sometimes I'm just personally going through a rough patch and I need counseling, and I'm afraid to go and use the programs within the organizations, because I'm afraid that if they hear that I am seeking counseling, they might use that against me for whatever reason. So how do you navigate?
I'm so glad you asked this question. So my master's dissertation was actually around the digitization of employee wellness programs, right? And part of that study was speaking to the factors that influence employee participation in these types of programs. And one of the factors that hinders participation is actually that concern around trust and confidentiality within the organization, and employees feeling like they can't really trust these, EWPs or EAPs, obviously depending on what your organization calls it. And then the responsibility for the company, for the managers, is to model behavior. If they are looking to leverage and to optimize, employee wellness by referring people to these services, the modeling of behavior is one of the key factors that helps to improve that participation. So leadership speaking openly, normalizing, conversations around mental health and mental well-being, and then leaders at different levels, whether you're a junior manager, middle manager, senior manager, also modeling that behavior by utilizing those services or engaging in help-seeking behaviors that show that if I am in this kind of predicament, these are the channels that I can use. And because my leader is doing it, it is then normalized. And then thirdly, it's around creating things like awareness, from the EAP side, but also from the organization side, and creating that culture that is wellness centered, where people are not afraid to engage in help seeking behaviors and to sort out help whenever they find themselves, in situations where there's distress or where their mental well-being is affected. And so that concern around trust and confidentiality and privacy is something that an organization has to proactively, invest in. And they invest in that, through different strategies, which I have highlighted. But another way is also having people who have used the services act then as custodians, of those services. And those have to be employees to say, hey, I am so-and-so from HR, and I was having this issue and I used the services and this is how they've helped me. I am so-and-so from finance, and I was having issues in my personal life and it was affecting my work life, and I was able to use these services, and this is how it helped me. And what that does is that not only does it normalize the utility of these services, it also just creates then that sense of, trust, and also embeds a culture of psychological safety, where people now see that it is normal to seek out help whenever I am in distress and to use these services. And again, the point around emphasizing confidentiality and privacy has to be an ongoing thing, whether it is on the EAP side or it is on the individual side, on the manager side or the company side, that ongoing emphasis on there's confidentiality, there's trust, there's confidentiality, there's privacy. It has to be something that is top of mind, because that is the only way, that employees would be able to use these services openly and freely. And if there are obviously cases where, that information has been used against them, then it's also around, integrating and re-energizing and re-educating your workforce that this is a service that is used for the benefit of employees, and you don't want that erosion of trust, because once that's there, it does affect how employees perceive these services.
Great. So what you're saying is that this programs that exist in a workplace are actually beneficial, but it's just that the current structure makes them to be underutilized. And so if employers can look into how do we make this as effective so that we can gain the most out of it as possible, rather than saying, well, it doesn't work, let's just eradicate it.
Yes. Because typically these programs are comprehensive, right? They're comprehensive in their service offering. I mean, they offer counseling, trauma counseling, there's access to financial counseling, legal aid, whatever the case is, they are typically comprehensive in that regard. And so, the work that then needs to be done is more around how do we instill a culture of help-seeking behaviors, number one. And then secondly, how do we ensure that, employees perceive these positively so that they are able to use them? Because you'll find, like I said, in terms of service offering, as well as just the initiatives around having different channels for employees to even access these. They digitize, they have apps, they have, telephones, telephone lines. They have different means to try and access these services, So in terms of the offering, it's there. The work that needs to be done is around the culture and creating then that culture to seek help, creating that culture that normalizes mental health, and then lastly, creating a culture that instills trust and psychological safety.
Great. And offset, we were talking about the work that you're doing. So mental health, wellness in the workplace, but also working with organization, offering coaching. All right. Because I remember I just watched a podcast with Gugu Mfumbi, and she was talking about Fupi, sorry. She was talking about how actually things like coaching, being available to every intern is actually helpful, because most of the time we are in a crisis management strategy, all right? We wait until there is a crisis, then to start doing something. But if we can anticipate that there will be crisis, you're an intern, you will struggle with financial management, you will struggle with confidence. There's cultural differences and culture shock. And my clients will say, you know what, I just came out of university with cum laude, and I'm going into a workplace, and none of the stuff that I've learned in university are actually applicable, or they're dismissed at work, and I don't know how to navigate with that. And so I think providing coaching to everybody who enters the workplace is actually very preventative in people hitting a crisis or being better managed. Being better equipped to manage even a bully, because then I won't internalize whatever you're saying. I will see the subtle stuff that you're doing, and I will not internalize it and start doubting myself. I'll be able to set the boundaries and be able to proceed with whatever journey I was. So how important is coaching, and how important it is for company to just incorporate it, especially for the interns?
It's so important. It's so important. Off air, I was saying that I would even prioritize coaching over mentorship, especially that early, right? And I think that, for mentorship, there usually is a disconnect from the mentor and the mentee because of the level of seniority that the mentor is typically at. And so they don't understand what is happening on the ground. They usually have an aerial or bird's eye view when it comes to matters and dynamics in the workplace without necessarily understanding the context. And so typically organizations lean towards, giving graduates, especially if they come in through a graduate program or an internship program, a mentor as opposed to giving them a coach. And a coach is somebody that helps them to contextualize what is happening around them, that is able to give them the strategies and the tools to be able to manage themselves. I mean, with some of the, interns that I work with, some of them struggle with things like prioritization.
Yes.
Just the other day, I had to give an intern a, Eisenhower matrix. So it's a priority matrix that allows them to differentiate, which is something we previously spoke about, between what is important and what is urgent. And they don't know how to do that. And just because they're receiving, instructions from their boss to saying, I need you to do this, they then think everything is urgent. It's like, oh my God, I have to do this right now because my boss gave it to me. And you're like, no, is this important or is this urgent? And they don't understand how to differentiate that. Or it's a case of them not being able to speak up for themselves, right? To say, but, you gave me this task last week and now you're saying I must do this one this week. Which ones actually, should take priority? And how do you then assert yourself in an instance like that? It's also, young people coming in questioning their, their choice, their career path, right? It's like, okay, I thought this was going to be the case. I mean, this is what I studied for the last 3 years, and now I'm entering the workforce and it's different to what I expect. And they lose sight of the bigger picture. And then coaching then comes to say, okay, let us give you then strategies to be able to explore different ways and different dimensions of your current role. How can you show up better? How can you optimize this opportunity of being in an internship to be able to get the best out of this experience, so that if it does happen that at the end of the internship or graduate program that you actually don't like this, you know that at least I have worked on the following skills that is going to allow me to pivot, or that is going to allow me to move into a different industry altogether. So coaching is practical. I think mentorship at that level becomes very out of touch and very theoretical. And it's only as you progress in your career where then, a mentor is something that you can deeply rely on, because then they give you that insight, in terms of how to then move up in the career. Yes, the career coach still has a place, especially at different levels as you move up. But I think we need to start, rethinking around how do we support new or early career professionals at work. And I think for me, the work of coaching, which is very practical, which is very based on tools and strategy and skills building, is very useful when it comes to helping young professionals at work.
Okay. Something that you haven't included in your bio was the fact that you're a certified coach.
Yes.
And it's more on careers, or is it just
it's general, right? So it's general. So NLP practitioner and life coach, but I've honed in on the career portion, especially because of the work that I do with wellness in the workplace. So it was obviously interviewing different industry professionals and recognizing that there is a gap, and there is a need to talk about career progression that is wellness centered. So you find different types of coaches, career coaches at that. A lot of the work, from what I've seen, is very much around career acceleration or career advancement. But I have not seen the emphasis that speaks about how do we make this wellness centered, because wellness will then ensure that you have sustainable success in your career, that if you want to pivot, if you want to transition, if you want to accelerate, then you have the grounding and the basis of wellness to help you navigate to all of these different transitions, right? So my coaching is focused on that. I ask you, have you rested? Are you resting? What are your priorities like? Or are you setting boundaries around this so that you are able to preserve your well-being in the process of your growth? And it does take personal experiences like having to reach burnout for me to make me realize how important centering wellness is in terms of just moving ahead and moving forward. You don't have to go full steam ahead. You don't have to fully charge all the time, but understand that you can pace yourself and structure your life and structure your work in a way that you can still achieve your goals, but still self-preserve in the process. So that is my focus when, we talk about coaching and specifically career coaching, which has been the bulk of the kind of clients that I've had exposure to.
And I love that, because we don't want to see people. We don't want to see, I don't want to see patients because they have overlooked certain things in their lives, and they waited until the robot turned red to say, now I'm going to see a psychiatrist, because being in private, what made me do a podcast was that I saw that, but the illness started a while back, and had we caught it then, it could have prevented a lot of the things that we now have to deal with, whether it's relationship breakdown, going into debt, substance abuse, just because we need to deal with wellness in a workplace, and yet I feel like people don't invest in that. They don't invest in their growth. They don't invest in the fact that I'm doing something different and I need someone to hold my hand. And yes, my mom could have held my hand through high school and stuff, and a friend held my hand through university, but now I need a professional to help me navigate the professional life. Do you find that people are coming in as in, I want to start something, can you help me navigate this? Or they come in when they're on the verge?
No, it's very, very active. I think it takes breakdown to be able to recognize that something is wrong for some people, right? So it's a very active way of crisis management, as you said. So if you are being proactive, then you are investing. But if you're being reactive, then you are fixing, right?
And it's more expensive
to fix. And because fixing also comes with the recovery journey. And recovery journey might also mean having to stagnate before you accelerate. And so it's always better to be proactive about these things. And I think, even in the case of, I was thinking about this as you were talking, that in a practical example, which is very understandable, is individuals needing a professional trainer because they're trying to hit their body goals. So if you want to be a certain weight, you want to have a certain body shape, you will realize that I have reached my limit in terms of understanding how I can optimize my body. And so I'm going to seek out help to do that. Coaching does that, right? Coaching is very much around optimization. So it's saying that, okay, I've gotten to this point in my career, and I want to now go to the next level, or I have reached a new stage in my life, and I want to know how I can best show up and how I can optimize. And that's where a coach comes in. And so it is unfortunate that it's very reactive. And when it's at that point, it's no longer coaching for me. It's more about fixing. And that's where the likes of you come in. And the coaching then has a place once again when the individual is in their recovery journey and they're looking for the practical day-to-day skills and tools to be able to navigate these changes. So it does keep us in business, but it shouldn't be the case.
We want to stay in business, but we want to prevent. We want to prevent a crisis rather than manage a crisis. Prevention is better than cure.
100%.
Will never grow old. Mbali, this was so beautiful, and I hope that our viewers will then now, do an introspection and say, what am I doing about my wellness in a workplace, or my mental well-being, or my general well-being in a workplace, and what am I investing in? Am I investing on a glass of champagne, or should I rather be investing on someone to coach me? I mean, I use your services not because I'm struggling, because I want to diversify myself. But I know that as a medical doctor, my knowledge on certain things is limited. And I just want to know that there is somebody who can see things in a different light and help me. And working with you has helped me see even the things that I was not even aware of. So in closing, what it is that we would like to say to our viewers, just to encourage them to be proactive and not to leave their wellness to the employer entirely. The employer has responsibility, but I believe that a lot of responsibility also lies with the individuals.
100%, yes. It's that shared responsibility I was talking about. But in closing, I would like to quote a mindfulness expert, also the CEO of a company called the Networking Company, Helen Nicholson. She likes saying, you cannot be brave if you are not well.
Wow.
And wellness is literally at the root of us showing up as our best selves. And so once you start recognizing the fundamental need for preserving your well-being.
Great.
And how it helps you grow, how it helps you accelerate, then you'll realize that it has to be a priority. You cannot be brave if you are not well.
I would never. Okay. Wow. That was beautiful. You cannot be brave unless you're well. And wellness is not something that happens by default. It's something that we have to be very intentional about. And wellness has parameters, just like a normal blood pressure has parameters. If your blood pressure is outside of those parameters, then it is abnormal. So wellness as well is a parameter that you must maintain. I always say sanity is a gift that most of us are born with, but it's a very fragile gift and it can be lost. And once it's lost in a workplace, it can really affect your life in a great way. And you're just not an island. There are people that you live with that are dependent on you. And so if one person falls apart, there's usually a system that goes down with them. So I really hope that you have learned from this and that you're going to be proactive in investing on your wellness and its maintenance. And we'll see you soon. Until then, love your mind.